My name is Charlotte Miller, and I'm 54 years old. Life didn't turn out the way I had imagined. My husband, Henry, left this world 3 years ago after a tragic car accident. He was a kind man, but often seemed to live in another world, always lost in deep thoughts that no one could ever quite reach. After he was gone, I thought the rest of my days would revolve around tending to my sunflower garden, attending small town gatherings, and quietly reading in the evenings during summer. But then, Ethan appeared. Ethan Scott, Henry's nephew, 32 years old, had just returned from New York after walking away from a high-pressure law career. He said he needed some quiet time to find himself again. He came to visit on a sunny morning in June. Ethan's dark brown hair glistened under the sunlight, and his blue eyes reflected the nearby lake's serene, crystal-clear water. At first, he stayed in a small cabin near the lake, and only occasionally stopped by to visit me, always keeping a respectful distance. But slowly, that distance began to fade. One afternoon, I was struggling with the backyard fence when a strong gust of wind knocked down part of the old wooden frame. I sighed, my hands covered in dust and dirt as I tried to prop it back up. "Let me help." Ethan's warm, steady voice came from behind me. I looked up, and he walked closer. His white button-down shirt was slightly wrinkled and clung to him with sweat. He must have just returned from one of his walks. "You don't have to do that," I said, feeling slightly embarrassed. "This is my work." Ethan gave me a soft, genuine smile, one that was undeniably charming. "Sometimes you need a partner." He was right. I couldn't even remember the last time someone had genuinely offered to help me. Ethan lifted a heavy wooden board with surprising ease, and within minutes, we had rebuilt the fence. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and smiled as he admired our work. "Looks as good as new." I chuckled. That's a bit of an exaggeration. But his smile made that afternoon feel lighter than it had in years. After finishing the fence, Ethan sat down on the porch steps, letting out a contented sigh while I went inside to make 2 glasses of iced tea. He gazed out into the distance, his blue eyes reflecting the shimmering light of the lake under the afternoon sun. A peaceful silence stretched between us, not heavy, but comforting. "You still keep the attic full of memories, don't you?" Ethan asked suddenly, his voice gentle but curious. I paused for a moment, feeling like he had just brushed against an old, unhealed wound. The attic was filled with memories, from my wedding photos with Henry to old belongings I couldn't bear to throw away. "Yes, but I never go up there," I replied, my voice small. "Too many memories to confront." Ethan didn't press further. He simply nodded and gave me a small, understanding smile, as if to let me know he understood. The next afternoon was oppressively warm, the kind of heat that hinted at an incoming storm. I tied my hair back and made the decision to finally face what I had long avoided, cleaning out the attic. As I opened the old wooden door, a thin layer of dust swirled up in the beam of sunlight filtering through the window. The old wooden trunk sat quietly in the corner, like a forgotten friend. "Let me help you." I jumped slightly and turned around. Ethan stood there, holding a water bottle, his gray t-shirt lightly dusted from his walk around the lake. Without waiting for me to answer, he stepped inside and lifted the trunk as if it weighed nothing. "Careful," I said, a faint smile playing on my lips. "That trunk is probably older than you." He laughed, setting it down gently. "All the more reason you need a younger set of hands." We opened the trunk together, and old photographs came into view. The memories spilled out like a river flowing backward through time. I picked up one photo. It was of me in a white floral dress, smiling brightly in a field of flowers during a fall festival. "You were beautiful," Ethan said softly, his eyes lingering on the photo with quiet reverence. I let out a small laugh, though it felt like a defense mechanism. "That was a long time ago." "That doesn't matter," he replied, his eyes meeting mine with a tenderness I hadn't seen in anyone since Henry. Without needing to say more, I knew at that moment what was happening between us. It wasn't just about memories. It was something new, something profound. The room suddenly seemed smaller, so quiet that I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my chest. You don't have to face all of this alone, Ethan said, his voice low and steady like a promise. I lowered my head, an unnamed surge of emotions washing over me. I had always believed I had to carry this pain by myself, but for the first time in years, someone was offering to share that burden with me. Nightfall descended, and the house became unusually quiet as I sat alone on the porch, watching the sun slowly sink behind the still surface of the lake. Ethan had gone out for one of his evening walks by the shore, but my mind remained in the attic, where old memories had been illuminated by the presence of someone who brought an unexpected warmth into my life. I held my cup of tea in my hands, thinking about what Ethan had said. You don't have to do this alone. Inside me, something was shifting, gentle but strong enough to melt the cold armor I had wrapped around myself for so long. A sudden summer rainstorm swept across the small house, the sound of rain falling steadily all around. I stood by the window, listening to the soothing rhythm of the rain, my heart feeling both hollow and full of emotions I couldn't name. Footsteps echoed softly behind me, and I turned around. Ethan stood there, his hair damp from the rain, his gray t-shirt clinging with a few wet spots, and his eyes held a steady resolve mixed with something uncertain. Are you okay? He asked, his deep, warm voice filling the quiet room. I nodded slightly, but he stepped closer anyway. His gaze wasn't just seeking an answer. It was searching for something deeper inside me. Do you need help? Ethan asked, gesturing to the pile of books and photo albums we had abandoned the day before. I forced a small smile. I think we've done enough for now. But he stayed close, and I could feel the warmth radiating from him, the faint scent of rain lingering on his damp clothes. My heart began to race, a heart I thought had long since quieted. After loss was now fluttering like that of a young girl in love for the first time. Ethan's voice softened as he spoke. There are things in life that we're not meant to carry alone, Charlotte. I shook my head slightly, trying to regain control of my thoughts. Ethan, we shouldn't. But my voice trailed off, swallowed by the closeness between us. He reached out and gently touched my hand. It was a fleeting touch, but it felt like the entire world shifted beneath me. Charlotte, Ethan whispered, his voice so tender that I couldn't look away from his sincere gaze. His hand still rested on mine, and the warmth of it seeped into my skin, making me tremble. The space between us became almost non-existent. I could feel his steady but slightly quickened breath. Then, as if crossing an invisible boundary, Ethan leaned down and gently placed a kiss on my forehead. I closed my eyes, letting myself absorb that soft, tender kiss that made my heart feel as though it would burst. I opened my eyes and looked into his sea-blue gaze again. This time, there was no distance left to keep us apart. His next kiss brushed against my lips, gentle, but filled with a depth I hadn't felt in all the lonely years that had passed. Everything dissolved. The pain, the old memories, the fears that had kept me from moving forward. Amid the sound of rain outside and the warmth within that small room, I knew I had crossed the line my mind had spent years building. Ethan wrapped his arms around me in an embrace that was more than physical closeness. It was as though he was trying to mend all the wounds I had carried alone. I couldn't hold back any longer and wrapped my arms around his shoulders, our breaths mingling as one. The room seemed to fall utterly silent in that moment, nothing but the rhythmic thudding of my heart filling the space. I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion, "Ethan, is this right?" He gazed into my eyes, so genuine that I couldn't bring myself to doubt him. "Charlotte, I can't let you walk through this alone anymore." Those words made me let go of every defense I had held onto for so long. We let ourselves be carried away by the moment, not thinking about the past or what might come after. Outside, the rain continued to fall, but I couldn't hear anything except the pounding of my heart and the tenderness of the arms holding me. For the first time in years, I felt life stirring within me. Powerful, yet so peaceful. I didn't know how long I stayed in Ethan's embrace. Everything blurred into a haze of emotions. My heart beat wildly, as if trying to wake me up from what had just happened, but my legs remained rooted, as though they no longer belonged to me. Ethan's warm breath brushed against my ear as he whispered, "Charlotte, we'll be okay." His voice, low and gentle like a lullaby, made my fragile reasoning falter. I still couldn't quite believe it was real. The tenderness, the look in his eyes, and his arms holding me like they could shield me from every storm. I leaned back slightly to look into his eyes. They were a deep, summer lake blue, unwavering as if to assure me that this wasn't just a fleeting moment of impulse. "What did we just do?" I whispered, my voice trembling as I struggled to regain clarity in the whirlwind of emotions. Ethan smiled, a sad yet relieved smile. "What you should have let yourself feel a long time ago." I froze at his words, each one shattered in my mind like glass, falling and touching the loneliness that had been hidden in my heart for so long. I turned away, walking toward the window, my hand trembling as it rested against the wooden frame. The coolness of the glass grounded me slightly, but not enough to calm the storm within my chest. "This changes everything, Ethan," I said, not daring to turn and look at him. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." I couldn't finish the sentence because his hand gently rested on my shoulder, a silent reassurance that I didn't need to be strong on my own anymore. The warmth of his palms seeped through the fabric of my shirt, making my breath catch in my throat. "I'm not asking you to have an answer right now," Ethan said, his voice behind me steady but soft. "I just want you to know, you don't have to go through this pain alone." I closed my eyes, feeling the quiet settle over the room. In that moment, I felt as though a broken piece inside of me had been carefully placed back where it belonged. Yet that very feeling scared me more than anything else. I turned to face him, the man so much younger than me, yet whose eyes carried a depth of understanding and experience that was almost heartbreaking. Ethan lifted my hand and held it gently. His hands were large and strong, yet the way he held me was delicate, as if I were something precious and fragile. My voice cracked as I spoke. "Ethan, I don't want to hurt anyone, and I don't want to lose what we have." He brushed his hand softly against my cheek, his eyes filled with such tenderness that I felt like I could melt beneath it. "You're not hurting anyone, Charlotte. You're just learning how to love yourself again." I stared at him, my heart tightening at the sincerity in his words. There was something so real, so undeniably right in the way he looked at me, as if he saw me more clearly than anyone ever had before. My breath came in uneven bursts, but for the first time in years I didn't feel weak for needing someone. I felt alive, present, and loved. Ethan leaned in, and our foreheads gently touched. Our breaths mingled, and the fragile distance between us disappeared. Amid the sound of rain outside and the warmth of that small room, I realized one thing. The boundaries of the past that I had built around myself had finally been crossed. Every wall within me had crumbled. All I could hear was the steady rhythm of my own heart and Ethan's whispered words. "You deserve to be happy, Charlotte." Tears fell down my face, not out of pain, but out of relief and release. I smiled faintly through the tears and rested my head against Ethan's shoulder, letting myself fully sink into the moment. A place where right and wrong no longer mattered, where fear was silenced and only two hearts remained, finding each other after the storms had passed. That evening, the room still held the warmth of Ethan's embrace. I sat on the porch, wrapped in a light blanket, the cup of tea in my hand growing cold as the evening breeze swept in from the lake. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving only the soft dripping of water from the roof onto the damp ground. Ethan was still inside, the light from the living room casting a soft glow into the darkness. He was quietly rearranging the old books, as if giving me a bit of space to reflect. I sat there in silence, staring at the shimmering light across the lake and feeling my heart beat steadily, yet conflicted. A quiet sense of happiness spread through me, the kind of warmth I had longed for, but never let myself admit. but along with it came a soft, lingering fear. Is this right? The whispered question from deep within me surfaced once more. I wondered if I was stepping into something beautiful, or if it was just a fleeting, intoxicating moment. The door behind me creaked open. Ethan stepped out, carrying a warm presence into the cool night air. He pulled a chair next to me, his eyes gentle but unable to hide the hint of worry within them. Charlotte. Ethan said my name softly, as though afraid to disturb the stillness of the night. Are you okay? I nodded slightly, but I couldn't hide the truth of my feelings. My eyes stayed fixed on the pale moonlight reflected across the lake's surface. Ethan, I began, my words slow, caught somewhere in my throat. What happened today? Everything we just went through. He didn't let me finish. His hand gently wrapped around mine again, its warmth dissolving every fear circling within me. I understand, he said, his eyes shining with quiet sincerity. You don't have to explain. I know how strange and unreal it must feel. I turned to look at him. In that moment, I realized that he wasn't as unsure or hesitant as I was. Instead, his gaze was steady, full of belief in something I hadn't yet accepted, that I deserved to be happy. I used to think, I said, my voice trembling but honest with every word, that my heart had closed forever, that after Henry, no one else could ever step into my life. Ethan gently tightened his grip on my hand, as if to remind me that I wasn't alone. And now, I smiled faintly, through the tears welling in my eyes. You've made me feel like my heart is alive again. Ethan didn't respond with words. He only looked at me, his eyes holding everything he didn't need to say aloud. We sat there for a long time, our shoulders brushing lightly, staring out at the still, quiet lake. The soft chirping of crickets filled the calm night air. Inside me, a wave of emotions surged, sweet yet overwhelming, almost hard to breathe through. Could happiness really come so easily? Do you think... Ethan hesitated, his voice soft as a passing breeze. That we could start over from here? I turned to face him, and his question sent me spiraling into yet another sea of emotions. Start over? A new beginning after everything I had been through? Ethan held my hand and said, his voice low and certain, You don't have to have an answer right now. I just want you to know that I'm willing to walk with you, no matter where this path leads. His words felt like a gentle wind, clearing away the lingering clouds of doubt in my heart. My heart told me that I didn't need to rush into any decisions. But in that moment, with his warmth beside me, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone anymore. We stayed there until the night settled completely over the lake, the water now cloaked in darkness, and only the soft glow from the house behind us remained. The mixed feelings of happiness and hesitation lingered, but in that gentle silence, I let myself believe in one simple truth. Maybe happiness wasn't something I needed to chase anymore. It was here, right beside me. The next morning, golden sunlight streamed through the window, casting soft rays across the wooden floor and the scattered books still left on the table. I woke up with a strange sensation, both light and heavy at the same time. Everything from the night before hadn't been a dream. Every moment had been real enough that I could still remember every breath, every glance, and the warmth of Ethan's hand holding mine so gently. I made my way down to the kitchen, my steps slower than usual, as if I wanted to hold on to this quiet time a little longer to steady myself. As I passed by the window, I saw Ethan standing outside, sleeves rolled up, adjusting the vines along the fence that the rainstorm had unraveled. I took a deep breath and stepped out onto the porch. Ethan turned when he heard my footsteps on the wooden boards. His eyes met mine, unwavering, open, and kind enough to make my heart flutter all over again. Good morning, Ethan said with a soft smile, wiping his hands on a small towel tucked into his pocket. Good morning, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady, though my heart was anything but calm. He walked closer, standing only a step away from me. The nearness brought every memory from the night before rushing back. I couldn't stop my gaze from drifting to his hands, hands that had held me with such honesty, without a trace of hesitation. The feeling of awkwardness hung between us like a soft cloud, making me a little uneasy. I lowered my gaze and began inspecting the flower pots on the porch as if to hide my embarrassment. "You're up early," I said, trying to change the subject, though I could hear the slight unsteadiness in my own voice. "So are you," Ethan replied, stepping closer. His voice was gentle, yet every word seemed to resonate deep within me. I gave a small laugh, though my heart was still unsettled. I couldn't sleep any longer. Another pause settled between us. Ethan furrowed his brow as though he wanted to say something but stopped, perhaps fearing he would make me feel uncomfortable. I could see the struggle in his eyes and knew that I too was feeling just as uncertain. "Charlotte," Ethan said softly, my name slipping from his lips like a quiet affirmation that we couldn't keep avoiding what had happened. I looked up, my eyes meeting his gaze. Once again, I felt the gentleness he gave me, not driven by impatience or urgency, but by patience and sincerity. I began, but I didn't know how to continue. "I'm still not used to all of this." "I know," Ethan said with a small, reassuring smile, as if trying to ease the tension inside me. "I'm not expecting you to get used to it right away, but I also don't want you to pretend it didn't happen." I froze. His words made me feel as though I were standing at a crossroads, one path leading back to the past with its wounds and fears, and the other leading to life and the warmth I had been searching for all these years. "Can we just take things slowly?" I asked quietly, my eyes searching his. "I need time to understand how I feel." Ethan nodded, and there was no disappointment in his eyes, only understanding and a quiet promise. "I'll wait, as long as you're still here." The days that followed were a series of moments both familiar and strange. We still did the same things as before, mending the fence, watering the flowers, walking along the lakeshore. But there was always a soft awkwardness in our glances when we crossed paths. There were times when our hands accidentally brushed as we lifted a flower pot together, and both of us paused a second too long, feeling the warmth as a reminder of something we couldn't ignore. But Ethan never rushed me. He only looked at me with eyes that seemed to say he would be there until I was ready to cross the walls I had built. Yet, no matter how much I tried to avoid it, I couldn't deny one thing. When Ethan was around, I felt like the woman I used to be years ago, full of life, but afraid that this overwhelming sense of reality could vanish at any moment. The days passed like a soft melody, though filled with uncertain pauses. I tried to live as though everything was normal, making tea every morning, tending to the flowers, reading on the porch. But every part of my routine seemed to carry traces of Ethan. Though we didn't speak about it, each time our eyes met, I knew we were both trying to maintain a delicate balance between reason and instinct. One late afternoon, golden sunlight stretched across the lake like a shimmering silk sheet. I found Ethan sitting by the shore, where the gentle waves lapped softly at the sandy edge. He sat quietly, his expression thoughtful. I walked over but said nothing as I sat down beside him. The light breeze carried the earthy scent of damp grass and early autumn leaves. "I know what I need to do," I said, my voice soft but certain. Ethan turned to me, his blue eyes still gentle but filled with anticipation. "I can't keep living halfway between the past and the present," I continued, feeling my heart beat faster with every word. "I can't keep being afraid of hurting someone else, or myself." "So, what will you do?" Ethan asked, his voice soft yet full of hope. I took a deep breath, my gaze drifting over the water glowing in the orange hues of the setting sun. "I'm going to move forward," I said, feeling a lightness spread through my chest. "Not for anyone else, but for myself." Ethan smiled softly, his eyes seeming to glow beneath the fading sunlight. "I'm glad you've realized that." I turned to look at him, my brow furrowing slightly as though trying to understand something deeper in his words. Ethan chuckled and went on. I didn't come here just to find peace for myself. I wanted you to know that you still have the right to choose happiness. And I just wanted to make sure that whatever you choose, you'll never have to walk that path alone. A wave of indescribable emotion welled up inside me. The walls I had built to protect myself had been crumbling for a while, but now I finally understood. The only thing holding me back wasn't the fear that Ethan would leave. It was that I hadn't yet dared to step toward the light. I stood up, brushed the sand off my dress, and reached out my hand to him. Let's go. Let's head back. Ethan took my hand, his eyes shining as though he was looking into a future neither of us could fully name, but one we no longer feared. We walked together across the grass, heading back to the small house by the lake, the place where I once thought my life had closed forever. That evening, as the last rays of the sunset dipped below the horizon and the soft night settled around us, I sat on the porch, feeling the cool autumn air against my skin. Ethan stood leaning against the doorframe, quietly watching me. There were things we didn't need to put into words. I didn't know exactly what tomorrow would bring, but I knew this. Happiness wasn't a destination. It was the steps I was willing to take, no matter if the path ahead was uncertain or filled with light. I turned back to him, my eyes meeting his gentle gaze once more. Shall we take a walk by the lake tomorrow? I asked, smiling, my eyes bright with a newfound resolve. Ethan nodded, a soft smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Yes, let's do that. In that moment, I realized that neither painful memories nor hesitation would define my story any longer. A new journey was only just beginning, and I was ready to take it, with all the freedom and courage I never thought I had.